Hello and welcome to News 9. I'm Aditya Raj Kaul and this is In India's Interest. Yet again, we are talking about a new book here on In India's Interest. We have spoken about Kashmir repeatedly, but today I have a very special guest, General Satish Dua, who has been in different capacities and different roles in the Indian Army. He is also credited as someone who was involved in the planning of the surgical strikes in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir against terrorists and their launch pads. But today, he has come up with a book which is a General Reminisces, a life under fire in Kashmir. This is the book in my hands. This is the second book after writing about India's brave hearts and their untold stories. General Dua, thank you very much for joining us today and taking out time. Let me begin by asking you that why Kashmir? You know, I know that Kashmir would be a place close to your heart. I know that you have served in Kashmir in different capacities. You've also been the Corps Commander there at the 15 Corps. And that too at a very crucial time when, you know, the episodes like Burhan Wani or the episodes of law and order situation in Kashmir or the Uri attack and thereafter the surgical strike took place. So you have written about India's brave hearts and this time about a Kashmiri. But why Kashmir?
So Aditya, you're right. First of all, thank you for having me on your show, and you're right to ask this question. There are many officers who served in Kashmir in multiple tenures, and I have also served practically in every rank except one. I have served in Jammu and Kashmir and different parts of Jammu and Kashmir, including Kargil. But also remember the fact that I am from Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry. So all my soldiers belong to Jammu and Kashmir. And there are Kashmiri Muslims, there are Muslims, Dogras, Sikhs of J&K. So my connect with the Awam, so to speak, and the understanding goes deeper than just the multiple tenures that I've had. So why did I pick this topic? This book is a product of one of my visits, some of my visits during my Corps Commander days when I went to Rashtriya Rifle battalions. Whenever I would go there, I was introduced to Jackal boys, my regiment boys, because every Rashtriya Rifle battalion has a few Jackal boys. They generate intelligence, they are in the commanding officers' quick reaction team, they take part in operations along with the commanding officers and all. And there are territorial army home and earth battalions. Their representatives are there in every battalion, especially in South Kashmir. In one such place, I also met the hero of this book, Nazir Wani. Now, that's when I realized the story of these surrendered terrorists. We'll talk about this, I'm sure, in the interview, but these surrendered terrorists who initially formed Ikhwan, a bold experiment of contra-rebels, which helped us conduct the 1996 elections, turning point, among other things. But then eventually a bolder experiment of raising a battalion from surrendered terrorists of my regiment, Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry, of which Nazir Wani was a part. So I wanted to bring out their story even then. Just 3 weeks, 24 days exactly after I retired, Nazir Wani made the supreme sacrifice. He already had 2 Sena medals. In an encounter with terrorists, he made the supreme sacrifice. He already had 2 Sena medals and he was awarded Ashok Chakra posthumously. Right. So then I took him as my protagonist because that's the story to tell. There are several others like him, but he's got a lot of bravery awards. And through him as the protagonist, I wanted to tell the story of how the state, the country that is, the state evolved in its fight against terrorism, the raising of Rashtriya Rifles, Ikhwans, the raising of the Territorial Army Battalion, and all the efforts that the state has made.
Very interesting there because, you know, I have perhaps, you know, each and every book on Kashmir that is published would be in my library as a Kashmiri, as a journalist who's been tracking Kashmir, and as a publisher's son. So I have these responsibilities at home and I keep a track of that. But, you know, this is perhaps one of the first books in my hands which talks about a brave heart of Kashmir. Somebody who had perhaps जिसे हिंदी में कहते हैं रास्ता भटक गया था. And then he came to the mainstream. Not only he came to the mainstream, but he actually gave his life
Yes.
For the country. So why Nazir Ahmed Wani? And for those who do not know, many would have seen his photographs on social media. Many would have seen that very emotional award ceremony also. But for those who do not know, why Nazir Ahmed Wani and who is Nazir Ahmed Wani? What's his story?
Right. So Nazir Ahmed Wani was a youngster. He was born just a few months after I was commissioned into Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry Regiment. And like I said earlier, he made the supreme sacrifice 24 days after I retired. So my entire service in Jackalai and his is concurrent with his entire life.
Right.
Nazir Ahmed Wani went on the wrong track initially. As a teenager, he started becoming like an OGW, running errands for the terrorists and things like that. But fortunately, before he was drawn more into it, before that happened, as the Ikhwan was raised, and the leaders that he was working with, they surrendered and joined Ikhwan, the contra-rebel force.
Right.
So Nazir Ahmed Wani also became an Ikhwan. And there are several hundreds of them. Kuka Peri, Liaquat Ali, Kuka Peri in the north, Liaquat Ali in the south. And there were so many leaders of JKSL, that terrorist group which surrendered and formed Ikhwan. Ikhwan, literally, as you know, means brotherhood. And Ikhwan helped turn the tide against terrorist groups. So much so that 1996 elections, which Mr. Dulat also says in his book was a turning point in the militancy cycle in Kashmir, was possible only because of Ikhwans generating intelligence and operating with the soldiers. So thereafter, the issue of territorial army battalion that was raised of comprising only of surrendered terrorists. While there may be parallels of contra-rebel groups like Ikhwan in the world, but I dare say there are no parallels of making an army battalion out of surrendered terrorists. So there lies the story. And why Nazir Ahmed Wani? The last thing I want to say is also that he is no accidental braveheart. He, before this Ashok Chakra that he was awarded posthumously, the highest award, before that he had 2 Sena medals. And for 9 years that he was in Ikhwan, they could not be given gallantry medals as all the Ikhwanis. So there were so many operations that he outperformed himself. And not only in India, he also served as a UN peacekeeping, part of UN peacekeeping forces in Sudan after he became a soldier. So this is the story not only of Nazir Ahmed Wani, it's of several bravehearts like him who followed the same path of being a terrorist, then Ikhwan, and then Territorial Army Battalion.
You spoke about Ikhwans. Again, many people would not connect with it because this happened in the 90s, yes. And this is not a format or a policy that is still being adopted or being used. General, I met a group of former terrorists in Kupwara. This was, I think, back in 2017 or 2018. And a lot of them who were very active in 90s, and actually, even today when you look at them, you could actually have some kind of a fear, because they are actually more than 6 feet height and good built, etc., and have spent considerable time in Indian jails as well. But they are completely reformed in many ways. And they at that time told me that they still want to play a larger role in the Indian democracy. At that time, they wanted to counter the Hurriyat, but the government wasn't willing to involve them. Do you think, if not a formula or a policy of Ikhwans, but something similar could be used even today to mainstream these former terrorists who decades ago perhaps were involved in terrorism?
Well, it's it's a very sensitive topic. It will have to be handled carefully, and all generalizations would fall flat on their face. So it would have to be on a case-to-case merit. But considering the time that we are in now, that means 5 years of central rule after moderation of Article 370, a lot of peace and development being ushered in through the center, rule by the center through Lieutenant Governor in last 5 years. And now that the political process has taken place and there is an assembly, elected representatives in place, this is the right time perhaps to use some such elements. There are well-meaning, and just like you said, I know several of them myself. After retirement, I have travelled extensively in Kashmir, especially South Kashmir, and met up with all these people. Some of them are from my regiment, but every Ikhwani did not join Territorial Army Battalion.
Of course.
I mean, Liaquat Ali, the famous, he was heading Ikhwan at one point of time. So he, for instance, did not. But he is a positive force. He is like one of those people that you mentioned. So I think I really sincerely feel that you have a good suggestion there, where some such elements could be used to not only to control or tame or give direction to misguided youth, but also to ensure that the radicalization and recruitment is countered well.
Since you mentioned radicalization, let me ask you that radicalization is one of the biggest concerns in the Kashmir Valley. In many ways, I personally believe that the Government of India and some of its agencies, some I say, not all, realized the potential harm of radicalization pretty late. Not just that, but of how to counter radicalization as well. I think it's only in the recent years we are putting more efforts in de-radicalization. But my question to you is, as compared to a normal Kashmiri in Kashmir, a Kashmiri youth, it is potentially very easy to convert or radicalize a youth in South Kashmir with the influence of Jamaat-e-Islami or other elements. Perhaps it could have changed in the recent times. But if we compare to Jaklai, a soldier, somebody from South Kashmir or perhaps North Kashmir, how is that very different? How will radicalization not take place in this context?
That's a very interesting question, and I've answered it a couple of times earlier as well. See, Aditya, it is the same youngster. When we have, say, 50 vacancies for recruitment in Jaklai or any other regiment in Kashmir Valley, I won't be exaggerating when I say 40,000 people turn up. Wow. It has happened. Yes. I remember talking on a Barkha Dutt's buck stops here then. When I was a corps commander, I gave these figures. With such large numbers who turn up for recruitment, that means on that day, if we could actually break all the rules or have no quotas or boundaries, all of them were ready to walk in as soldiers. Right. But vacancy-based recruitment, only 50 can be taken. Now the others, some of those who go back disappointed will pick up stones and some will pick up weapons. Now, that's your question. This soldier, why is he not radicalized? Because at a young age of 16 or 17 or 18, he is actually brought in, physically separated from that environment. He is brought into our training center in Rangret, in Badgam. Now for 1 year, he undergoes training. He undergoes or lives under positive influences, patriotic influences, undergoing training. He becomes confident and capable young man as a soldier. From his transformation from boyhood to manhood is under very positive influences. And he learns weapon training, field craft, endurance, and he develops confidence in himself. He's a military professional. Then he actually gets posted to another place. He gets posted out of Jammu and Kashmir. And once he gets posted to out of Kashmir, what happens then? He, on one hand, he's removed from those negative influences, as I said earlier. But on the other hand, he also sees how the rest of the country has developed. He sees how people are living in prosperity and peace. The peace dividend is there to see. Then he realizes the difference, because those who live in the valley, a lot of them, when we send these young boys and girls for these goodwill tours and Sadbhavna tours around the country, we realize most of them are going out of the valley for the first time. So I think there lies the difference as to why this young man, who is one, removed from these influences, and secondly, he sees the world. I think that is the difference between him. And on the other hand, In the valley, he's constantly, a youngster is constantly subjected to negative influences. He has this, those days separatists used to issue calendars of protest and buns. There was stone pelting happening. Even his peers would chide him as to why is he not taking part in stone pelting if he doesn't, and so on and so forth. So he continued to get radicalized. And of course, then there are those who, with great intention from the ISI, the handlers, everyone is actually looking forward to radicalizing this young man.
General Dua, there are two more names that come to my mind since we are speaking about youngsters from Kashmir who have sacrificed their life for the nation. One is Lieutenant Umar Fayaz,
Yes.
and the other one is, I think, Rifleman Aurangzeb. And you know, both these names have also touched me immensely. And you were serving at that time, so you have fresh memory of what exactly happened. I want to ask you about your thoughts about them when it happened, how the society has remembered them. And secondly, I saw massive protests across the country when Fayaz was kidnapped and his killing took place. I also remember receiving a phone call from SSP of Shopian telling me that one of the army boys has been kidnapped, and you know, the terrorists have called me and asked me to release a particular terrorist, and only then you know, he will be handed over. And I was one of the first journalists to actually break this story, but it was so painful for me because I knew that this person has been kidnapped, 6 hours have been given, and certainly the government will not in these 6 hours release this terrorist.
Yeah.
And Aurangzeb's that haunting image
Yes.
of looking into the camera moments before his death. What were your thoughts?
Let me take Aurangzeb first. Aurangzeb is from my regiment. He was from my regiment. And he was so active in counter-terrorism operations that when he was going on leave, he is from the Jammu region. And in that Mender Punch area, when he was going on leave for Eid, that he was kidnapped. And like you said, that video clip when he was kidnapped by terrorists, and you brought out the story, I won't repeat that. But the fact is that Aurangzeb proved his bravery in looking into the eyes of death. When the terrorists made a video, at that moment they must have thought that they will show this video of a soldier who's groveling for his life, because they would show that to sort of demoralize the nation. But he looked steely-eyed and he said words to this effect. He said, I know I'm going to go to my maker. I have no fear. You can do what you want. No begging, no groveling, and he calmly met his end. I think that made the nation very proud. Sad, but very proud. Lieutenant Omar Fayaz. He was a young man who's gone on leave for a wedding. He was invited for a wedding in the family. And terrorists pick up such soft targets. He was not on duty, and he was picked up and brutally murdered by terrorists. So such things, I remember there was a candlelight vigil at India Gate.
I was there, yes.
I was there myself.
Yes.
In fact, the channel started interviewing me because I was the only senior officer who came. I came in civil dress, but I was there. So I remember a lot of his batchmates came from the National Defence Academy.
I remember that.
And when they met me, they saw me, they recognized me, they all came around me together. So many of them did not know where they want to stay for the night. I helped make arrangements for them. So that is the kind of mobilization. The country was mobilized. The country was moved and jolted by his death. So I think we need, such icons. Instead of only having Burhan Wani was the icon those days, we need Nazir Wani, we need Aurangzeb. You know, and there was another Mukhtar Ahmed who was killed by terrorists. You remember Mukhtar's story. So you know, there are such people who have also moved the nation.
General Dua, coming to the present context, you know, you've seen ever since the Prime Minister Modi's government came in for the third time, there are these attacks that have begun again.
Yes.
Initially, it was restricted to the Jammu, where a new front perhaps was being opened. That was the perception. In Riyasi, we saw Hindu pilgrims being attacked. Then in Kathua, Doda,
Yes.
in Rajouri, and in other places, we saw a lot of infiltration and very well-trained terrorists, I must say, who've been conducting these attacks. And then anti-terror operations by the army, by the other security forces as well. But in the recent times, again, we have seen with first kidnapping again of an army soldier and then killing him, and then frequent attacks in which numerous civilians from Jammu and Kashmir and others have been killed. How do you see this fresh development? One, we know that Pakistan is perhaps, they have this fuse in their hand, which they increase and decrease as per their understanding or as per developments in Pakistan. But do you see a fresh, backing or fresh energy being put into this anti-India operations by Pakistan's proxy war factories?
I would put it this way, that though the incidents that you mentioned are right, they have happened. Initially, when Article 370 was moderated, Pakistan made a lot of noise. But eventually, it was an internal matter of our country and nothing happened. Nothing came out of it. Then as slowly as things started getting better and the youth started tasting the peace dividend in the valley. Now Pakistan or the terrorist groups and the separatists are also rattled. They don't want normalcy to set in. The tourists are moving, the schools are not closing, no bans, no hartal, markets are opening. There is the tricolors is being hoisted on Lal Chowk, and Aarti took place during Diwali in Lal Chowk.
Yes.
So these are the things that they don't want. They don't want this to happen. They want to instill fear in the minds of people. So they initially they pick up soft targets, the pilgrims in Riyasi, a chemist being shot and things like that. And labor from other states being shot. Then I look at it this way: they want to keep the pot boiling, so they also create a few attacks on security forces, because otherwise they would lose all the sympathy with the local populace. So what has taken 3 or 4 decades to fester cannot be undone overnight. I think it will take us time. But callous as it may seem, I would like to say that if you compare, while I'll start that again to say, while loss of a single life is sad enough, but if you take your mind back to what was happening, say 5-10 years ago, the number of deaths, the number of violence on the street, the number of casualties, and that was happening today, the numbers are very less. But they have to keep the pot boiling, and I'm sure the security forces will be able to get a lid on it. Will it be zero? Not in the near future. But it will be certainly below a threshold where the newly elected government can now prosecute development, usher in reforms, and do that outreach that they had stopped doing.
General Dua, one last question, and coming back to your book now, you speak about Nazir's last roar. You speak about his bravery, his Ashok Chakra. And there are numerous stories, but unfortunately I often see that the Kashmiri heroes who sacrifice their life often die in oblivion. I know stories of Muhammad Ayub Pandit, the J&K police CID officer, Altaf Laptop, Mudassir from Baramulla, so many other stories, not just these are J&K police I'm quoting, yes, but then from the army, the ones that I quoted before. How would you want the nation to remember Nazir Ahmed Wani? How would you want the nation to remember these Kashmiri bravehearts who have sacrificed their life for the country? And how would you jolt the nation's memory to keep these stories of these bravehearts alive?
Aditya, you make a very good point. I am from Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry Regiment. So like you are a Kashmiri and it irks you. My Karam Bhumi is also Kashmir. And it irks me. And that is why this book. The idea is to bring out these stories, not only to the state, to the nation, to the country as a whole. We need to have such stories being told, so that what I write somewhere in the end of the book is that we want to explain that message to others. And this is what I write in the book, saying that every Kashmiri with a beard is not a terrorist. Right. Just like I always say, I should tell the Kashmiri youth or awam that just like every soldier with an AK rifle is not your enemy, he is here to help you. So I think we need to tell these stories.
Well, absolutely. We need to tell these stories to the audience there who are watching this interview. This is the book, The True Story of a Terrorist Turned Hero, a General Reminisces, A Life Under Fire in Kashmir, by General Satish Dua. It has, in fact, a foreword by the Chief of the Defence Staff of India, General Anil Chauhan. You must actually get this book online or a bookstore near you, because this is a story of courage, of valor, a story of determination, of giving up life for the country, a story that perhaps hasn't been written before, but there are many such stories that need to be written and told to the entire nation. General Dua, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.